alluded to, our next speaker, we can be really proud of. Over the last decades, he has been a voice in this country, but never more stronger than right now, when this country needs to have a voice talking about a different path that does put our communities first and working people first. We are very proud to have the best senator in the country who's becoming America's senator. Please, a warm welcome for Senator Bernie Sanders.
Today, Labor Day, is a special day in America. And it's a day that says we're here to thank a whole lot of people who keep our country going 24/7, who often don't get the recognition that they deserve. You know, one of the things, of many things that bothers me is you pick up some of these national magazines on the front pages, in glossy printers, these photos of all these mega billionaires and trillionaires and everything else, and they're talking about how brilliant they are and all the good stuff they do on Wall Street, etc., etc. But we forget that every single day there are millions and millions of people going to work, keeping our country going. And right now, as you all know, with the terrible disaster of Irene in front of us, I can just give you a few anecdotes of what I have seen with my own eyes. On Saturday, I was down in Brattleboro and Wilmington. Wilmington, especially the whole downtown business sector, devastated. Go down there, and there was a state trooper who was kind enough with some other people to walk me around and take a look at the problems facing the community. And he just calmly mentions to me that his own home had been destroyed. So here's a guy going to work, doing his important work, and he's living someplace else, and he has to be dealing with all the problems associated with losing your house. Go down there, downtown, and I see this police officer who I've known for many years. I'm looking at him. This is a Burlington cop. He used to be the mayor of Burlington. I said, what are you doing down here? You know, this is Wilmington. He said, well, 30 cops in Chittenden County went down there to relieve the brothers and sisters who've been out straight, dealing with all the pressure. And they did it not, because it was a job. They did it because they wanted to do it, they were proud to do it, and it is what solidarity is all about. When I was in Brattleboro going to Wilmington, some of you may know Route 9. It's a bad enough road under good conditions. And whole sections have been wiped out, which is why Wilmington for a while was isolated. You go down there, and there's dump truck after dump truck. These guys were building furiously, rebuilding roads and opening up Wilmington. Just an extraordinary effort on their parts. And then we all know that in Rutland, we had a man and his son. Here was a guy who was worried about the dam in Rutland and what it might do. His name is Michael Garofano. He and his son went up to inspect it. And a flash flood hit them, and they did. And this is what we see every single day, not just in emergencies, but wonderful people who take their work enormously seriously and every day make our state a better place in which to live and work. And today we honor those people, but not just the people who come out and do such a good job in tragedies. And when we think about tragedies, I'm thinking right now about 9/11. We're going to be remembering the 10th anniversary of that. Thousands of people who lost their lives on that terrible day. And we're thinking about the people who have developed cancer, the workers who rush in there trying to save lives, going through the debris, trying to clean it up. You may have seen a recent study out there that 17, much higher percentage of those workers have cancer than a similar type of workers. People gave up their lives to try to deal with that disaster. But it's not just tragedy and disaster, 9/11. It's what happens every single day. And that is that we have folks, we have nurses here, who every single day are there with us, delivering our babies, taking care of our parents who are at the end of their lives. And we thank them for their dedication. They are the backbone of our healthcare system. And I want to say something about the nurses in the state. It is one thing to go to work every day and do that very, very difficult work. And it is another thing, on top of that, to be part of the leadership in fighting for a single-payer healthcare system. And the reason that our nurses are doing that is very decent. What they are saying is we are professionals. We want to do our job as best we can. And we cannot do it under the current system. Because they see people who are coming in to the hospital or into the doctor's office who should have been in that office 6 months ago. And one of the facts that we don't talk about too much in this country when we talk about health care is that this year, according to a study from Harvard, approximately 45,000 Americans are going to die because they don't get to a doctor when they should. And by the time they walk into the doctor's office, it is too late. So that is why I am very proud to be working with our nurses and with all of you and various other organizations, the AFL-CIO, to say that this state is going to lead the nation in a new direction in healthcare through a Medicare for all single-payer program. don't get the benefits they are entitled to. They are doing some of the most important work in our society. They should be rewarded accordingly. Year after year, this state ranks way up at the top in terms of how well our kids are doing on national exams. It is not an accident. Thank you very much, teachers. Many of you will remember very well that 3 years ago, as a result of the greed, the recklessness, and the illegal behavior of the crooks on Wall Street, and I use that word very advisedly, people who were selling worthless financial products, which brought down our economy and almost led to the collapse of the international financial system and almost led us into a world depression. By the time Bush left office, we were losing 700,000 jobs a month. That is an unbelievable number, and that is, of course, economically unsustainable. Now, we've recovered somewhat since then, but everybody in this room knows that we are in the midst of the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression of the 1930s. Now, when you watch TV tonight, they will tell you that unemployment in America is 9.1%. That is a very high number, but that's not the real number. Real unemployment, when you include those people who have given up looking for work, when you include the millions of people who are working part-time, who want to work full-time, is over 16%. 16%. But it's not just high unemployment. Median family income in the United States has declined by over $2,500 during the last 10 years. In other words, people are working and working and working, and they have less income today than they did 10 years ago. Further, today, we have lost, in the last 10 years, 50,000 factories. You know what? You go to the store and you go shopping, and what do you find? You find that it is harder and harder to buy a product manufactured in the United States of America. 50,000 factories shut down, millions of good-paying jobs have been lost. Today, we have the sad sight of millions of American workers, including a lot of older workers, who are today working longer hours for lower wages. How do you think it feels to be 50, 55, 60 years of age today and be making 25% less than what you made 10 or 15 years ago? And that's happening all across the country. Today in America, when we look at the economy, we cannot forget 50 million Americans have no health insurance at all. 50 million people. And what happens if you are a 40-year-old low-income worker who has no health insurance? And what happens if you have a pain in your chest? And what happens if you delay going to the doctor? What may well happen is you're going to end up in a hospital a lot sicker than you should have been, or in some cases, and I've talked to a number of physicians who see this, you will die because you didn't get to the doctor's office when you should. Today in America, more and more of our people are going hungry. We're going to be doing a hearing. I'm the chairman of a subcommittee in the Senate. We're going to do a hearing in 2 weeks. You know what the title is? The title of the hearing is poverty as a death sentence. And what that means, if you are poor, people say, well, being poor is not good. You don't have a good house, and you don't have a big fancy TV. But you know what poverty really is about? If you are a college graduate, you will be 5 years longer than somebody who dropped out of high school. 5 years longer in the United States of America. Today, child care, as I mentioned, is unaffordable, and millions of kids are getting off on a very bad start. Now, meanwhile, while we are seeing the collapse of the middle class, while we are seeing a significant increase in poverty, there is another phenomenon which is going on. And you've heard a little bit about it this evening. And that is that the people on top have never had it so good. So this is not like a situation, well, isn't it too bad our whole country is hurting, we're all in it together. Not the case. The reality is that in America today, we have the most unequal distribution of wealth and income of any major country on earth. Top 1% earns more income than the bottom 50%. The top 400 people in this country own more wealth than the bottom 150 million. 150 million. But it's not just a question of being very wealthy and owning, 10 homes and a big car and flying around in your own private jet. What these people are increasingly doing with their money is not putting it on the mattress. These are the folks who own the media. As a result of an absurd Citizens United Supreme Court decision, these people can now spend as much money as they want on campaigns without having to divulge who they are. So we're seeing what big money is doing is not only enriching themselves, they are creating a political and economic infrastructure to protect their own interests. So what the economy is about, middle class collapsing, poverty increasing, gap between the very, very rich and everybody else is growing wider. And then that leads us to the issue of deficit reduction, which you have heard, no doubt, a whole lot about in recent months. Let me say a word on that, because I hope and expect that most of you understand what that's about. This country has a $14+ trillion national debt and a $1.3 trillion deficit. You know why we have that deficit and that debt? We have 2 wars that were started under the Bush administration. And guess what? George Bush and his Republican friends forgot something. They forgot to pay for the wars. Gee, slipped my mind. Oh, $160 billion, I knew we forgot something. And then, spending a huge sum of money fighting the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, they said, well, we've got to take action. These wars are very expensive. You know what we got to do? We got to give huge tax breaks to the wealthiest people in this country. And we have to pass a Medicare Part D prescription drug program written by the insurance companies. And in the middle of all that, because of the recklessness of Wall Street, we get into a recession, massive unemployment, less revenue coming in. Today in America, we have less revenue coming into the federal coffers than any time in the last 50 years. So less revenue, 2 wars, tax breaks for the rich, and you know what you end up with? You end up with a deficit. And you end up with a national debt. Now, I was in the House during a lot of this stuff. I don't recall any of these guys talking about their grave concern about the deficit. Hey, there's a war, let's spend. Today we're spending 3 times more on the military than we did in 1997. No problem. Got a good war out there? Let's spend. Richest people in this country are getting richer. They need another tax break. Let's do it. But then some of them woke up and said, oh my word, we have this terrible deficit. We have got to move toward So the dynamic of what we have, tax breaks for billionaires, and then a move to balance the budget on the backs of the elderly, the sick, the children, the most vulnerable people in this country. Now, I voted against that deficit reduction package because it struck me that it was morally obscene that at a time when the wealthiest people are becoming wealthier, that they were not asked to contribute one nickel for deficit reduction. And second of all, I voted against it because in terms of economics, we're not going to have the economic growth that we need until we put money into the hands of working people. And laying off hundreds of thousands of workers, as that bill will do, in the midst of a severe recession, did not make a whole lot of sense to me. As some of you know, there is now a super committee that is dealing with deficit reduction. And my message to them, which will be very loud and clear, is that we are not going to balance the budget on the backs of working families. Large corporations, in some cases in this country today, are making billions of dollars in profits, and in some years, they pay less than you do in taxes. Sure. Wealthiest people today are doing phenomenally well. The effective, the real tax rate for the very rich, as Warren Buffett has recently reminded us, is the lowest that it has been in decades. So if we are serious about deficit reduction, our corporate friends, some of whom stash huge amounts of money in the Cayman Islands and in Bermuda and in other tax havens in order to avoid paying taxes in this country, they are going to have to start paying their fair share. Furthermore, at a time when we have tripled military spending since 1997, the time is now to begin in a very aggressive way to bring the troops home from Iraq and Afghanistan and start taking a hard look at excessive military spending. Is in fact an important issue, no question about it. But there is another issue out there that is even more important. And that is that we have 25 million Americans today who are unemployed, 16% of our population. I believe that, again, from a moral and economic imperative, now is the time in a very aggressive way to put those people back to work. So, instead of laying off teachers, we want to increase the number of teachers that we have. We want to make sure that we have child care centers all over this country taking care of the little children. Instead of laying off firemen and police officers, we want to make sure that our cities and towns have the law enforcement and fire protection that they need. But equally important, all you have to do is drive around the state of Vermont or probably any other state in this country, and what you find is an infrastructure which is crumbling before our eyes. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, we need to spend in the next 5 years $2.2 trillion just to bring the infrastructure up to a fair level, not particularly good. China is today spending 9% of their GDP on infrastructure. In the next 10 years, China plans on building 97 new airports. They already have high-speed rail all over the country. They want to do more of that. They have broadband all over their country. It seems to me that if China can do it, we can build an infrastructure bridges. I was just in Burlington. We had a lot of rain in Burlington. Driving downtown Burlington, it was like a flood. Water accumulated. That's in Burlington. But all over this state and this country, we need roads, we need bridges. We got a whole lot of bridges. We need work in the state, and quite a lot more since the last week. We need to build a rail system for the 21st century. We need new airports. We need to rebuild our schools, our water systems, our wastewater plants. We need to make sure we have high-quality broadband in every community in the United States of America. Those are the things that we need to do to make us into a strong and competitive country. And when you do that, you put millions of people to work. Second of all, every single year we are spending about $350 billion importing oil from Saudi Arabia and other foreign countries. I think that is insane. We have the capability to move toward energy independence, and that means energy efficiency, making sure that every home and office building and factory in the United States of America is well insulated, that we're not wasting energy. It means moving to such sustainable energies as wind, solar, geothermal, and biomass. And when you do that, you are combating global warming. When you do that, you're combating air pollution. When you do that, you make our country energy independent, so you don't have to get involved in wars in the Middle East. And when you do that, again, you are putting millions of people back to work. So I want to see that. Thirdly, we need to take a very hard look at our current trade policy. I know it's not a sexy issue, and a lot of people don't pay attention to it, but we should. In my view, trade agreements like NAFTA, CAFTA, permanent normal trade relations with China, i.e. unfettered free trade, would say to the American worker, you now have to compete against people who are making 25, 50 cents an hour. A friend of mine, a guy who works in my office, he was in Bangladesh. He and his wife were working in Bangladesh a couple of years ago. He comes and said, Bernie, good news. In Bangladesh, they raised the minimum wage for workers, mostly young women coming in from the countryside who make shirts. Raised the minimum wage. They went from 12 cents an hour to 25 cents an hour. All right? In my view, American workers should not be forced to compete against people who work for pennies an hour. We need a trade policy which is based on fair trade principles, not unfettered free trade. And when we do that, when we start rebuilding our manufacturing sector here, so that companies who want us to buy their products start producing their products in America, our economy will be a lot stronger. Now, I know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, that these are very, very, very tough times for our country. I'm going to be, within the next 2 weeks, in Wisconsin, and I'm going to send our solidarity to the people of Wisconsin who have been standing up and helping fight. I'm going to be in Iowa, and I'm going to be in Illinois. And the message that I will be sending our brothers and sisters in the Midwest is the following. I know that a lot of people are not only hurting economically, people are hurting emotionally as well. They're very frightened about right-wing extremists who like to do away with Social Security, Medicaid. People are disappointed in many respects. The president has not been stronger, disappointed in the Democratic leadership. But this is what I want to say. The struggle that we're in now, and I think also a lot of people say, you know, I'm just sick and tired of it, I can deal with it, forget it. I'm not going to be involved in it. And what I want to say to anyone who holds those thoughts, what this struggle is about today. And we are in a pivotal moment in American history. A pivotal moment. Where you have an energized right wing funded by corporate and government interests. What this fight is about is not just your life or my life. What this fight is about is our children and our grandchildren. This nation is an extraordinary nation in so many ways. My dad came to this country at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket. And he was the proudest American he was. So he never made any money. But he was so proud that he could freely raise his 2 kids in this country. Every single person in this room has a similar story. All of the great things that we take for granted. In my view, history is a funny kind of thing. Right now, we're discouraged. But things change very, very quickly. And I think as you heard previous speakers say, if we stand together as a people in our own state and around the rest of the country, we understand that there are a lot more of us than there are of them. They have the money, they may own the TV networks and the newspapers, but there are a lot more of us than there are of them. And what we have to do is develop a vision based on human rights. It's a vision which I think, not just the people in this state, but people in most parts of the country believe. What are we talking about? We're talking that healthcare is a right of all people. It's not a revolutionary idea. Most industrialized countries have already achieved that. We're saying that our kids deserve a quality education starting at child care, and that every kid in this country, regardless of income, should be able to get a good quality college education. We're saying that if we rebuild our infrastructure, our energy system, we can create millions of jobs, putting people back to work at good wages. We're saying that workers have a right to be members of unions and negotiate collective bargaining agreements. We're saying that as human beings, we do not want to see this planet destroyed through global warming, and we're going to cut back on greenhouse gas emissions. That's all that we're saying. We're saying that we want to use our resources to improve the lives of people in our state, our country, all over the world, rather than spending huge sums of money on wars and destruction. So I beg of you, when you get discouraged, you don't have a right to get discouraged. Because it's not your life. What we're talking about is our kids and our grandchildren. And I believe in the bottom of my heart that we can do it. We can do it. When people stand together, and I think there were some references about just what happened in this flood, about people building roads out of nothing, people helping people all over the place, go to communities. I was in Waitsfield the other day, 200 people came out to clean up their downtown. When people stand together with a common human vision that says we're in it together, that greed is not what this country is about. When we hold that vision, when we're prepared to get our hands dirty and stand up and fight back, we can win, we can transform this country, and we can leave to our children and grandchildren a better world. And we are going to do that. Thank you very much.